Okay, this is a recording of a debrief for round 5. So the rounds have been processed. Let me go ahead and debrief Industry 95. So here is Industry 95 at the end of round 5. And let's see, where are we? We do have an emergency loan, Chester. Not a huge emergency loan, 5.5 million. We could look into that below and see what caused the cash crunch for Chester. Again, this is Industry 95 Chester. Andrews on top with the top sales in the industry, $161,000. Also in profits, a very healthy $21 million in profits, and very strong, in fact, the highest contribution margin in the industry, which is great. Um, from a stock price perspective, we're going to see Andrews increase based on that performance this round, which is a pretty good pop, pretty good increase there. Increase of $35, close at $58, market cap of over 126 million, well, at $126 million market valuation. Let's look at production for the industry. Let's actually, in the cash flow statement, let's look at Chester and see what happened to their cashes. So they actually made a good amount of money from their business activities, the net income from their operating activities. Let's see, their inventory was not huge, so their change in inventory was very little. The net cash from operations was 11, almost $12 million, which is great. So that's kind of surprising. So it wasn't their business that led them to be short on cash, that led them to that emergency loan at the end of round 5. Let's see what else happened. They paid some dividends and they retired some current debt. Looks like their big investment here was plant improvements. So they spent 14.5 million on plant improvements. It looks like that was not financed very well. Looks like the net cash from financing activities was a negative 11,000. So they spent 14 million, but they didn't pay for it. I think that's going to run you into a little bit of trouble. And so that yeah, that's probably how they, because they started. I mean, they had their business for 8 million. That was their uh, net income from the actually business. But then they spent 14 million on plant improvements, which is capacity, which is new products, right? R&D, automation is in there. And so those cumulative decisions put them in a cash crunch. And basically, they lost money overall and they had to get an emergency loan. So they were short, and that's where their emergency loan came from. So they invested 14 million. Their emergency loan was over 5.5 million. Had they invested less or financed that better, financed those plant improvement decisions, that would have avoided that emergency loan. Let's see what else. So from a production perspective, oh wow, a lot of stock outs here for Andrews. A lot is a new product, so they haven't sold anything yet. So 3 products stocked out, 2 in the high, 1 in the low for Andrews. Buddy in the high tech stocked out, and Kerr stocked out. So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4 high products stocked out. Pretty interesting. Some of the other high tech products did not stock out. Looks like we only have 3 new products coming online next round. A lot, Area, Sea Area, Aria, and Dust are new products for round 6. Okay, great. That's Industry 95. Let's go ahead and look at Industry 96. And we had 2 emergency loans in Industry 96. Andrews with a $3.8 million loan. Chester in Industry 96 with a 2.2, almost $2.3 million loan. So both of these companies were also short on cash, which is interesting because they made a lot of money, right? Look at those sales numbers, 143,000. Isn't that interesting? You can make so much money and you can still run out of cash at the end of the year. Not by much, but by a little enough to get an emergency loan. Chester with very healthy 45.4% contribution margins on the product level. That means their variable costs are low. It means that they're making money at the product level very, very well. Let's see. Profits also, Chester, very strong profits here. $21 million profits in just one round, which is basically half of their cumulative profits. How about that? So if you look at their cumulative profits through round 5, half of those came in just this one round, which is pretty interesting. If we look at the stock price, yeah, we're going to see Chester's going to pop. Andrews continued to increase. Look at that. Even though they did have an emergency loan, probably part of that was their dividend, a huge dividend that they paid. $3.50 dividend. That's going to help maintain their stock price improvement, even though they saw an emergency loan. Chester also with an emergency loan, but also saw an increase in price. They had also a dividend, and it looks like they had purchased some shares. I don't know if that's this round or last round, but their shares are a little bit lower. So that's also going to increase their stock price as well. From a production perspective, let's see, from a cash flow perspective, what was it that led to a little shortage on cash? This is an interesting one. What does this mean? What does that mean? 10 million. That's a pretty good one. 21 million investment in plant improvements. That's a lot of cash, right? So cash is leaving the cash barrel and going into accounts receivable and plant improvements. And that's going to take some cash. So that's 31 mil. Even though they netted 21 from profits, accounts receivable. So what does that mean? That means they're saying, hey, customers, pay us back later. You don't have to pay us now, pay us later. But that takes cash, right? Because if customers are not going to pay them now, customers are going to pay them next month instead of this month. So the cash that they would have received had customers pay them this month, they didn't receive, or this year, they didn't receive until the following period. So that's going to take some cash. Plant improvements was also very high. The net financing was about 6 million on a 21 million plant improvement. So a little bit difference there between their decisions to improve the plant and their financing of those decisions. Also led to a cash crunch. So their emergency loan was 2.2 million to get them back to a zero cash balance at the very end of the year. So very small, very small, but huge investments in plants, huge accounts receivable decisions change led to a cash shortage there in Chester. On the Andrews side, what do we see? Also very strong plant improvements, 24 million plant improvements. These two teams are revving up for the last 3 rounds of the simulation. They also retired some current debt. They paid some dividends. So those, what's that, a 17, 18 million, almost $18 million there. So those are also significant cash impacts. And so they also were short at the end of the year. They needed 3.8 million to get to a cash balance of 0. So they're ramped up, although they have no cash this round at the beginning of the year. They're ramped up for some pretty incredible plant improvements. We'll see what happens there. Finally, from a production perspective, let's see what happens here. So I also see some stock outs here. Ayo stocked out in the high tech. Baker and Bumble both stocked out in the low tech. Maybe that's a good thing. Camaro stocked out in the low tech. Cooper stocked out in the high tech. And then we have one new product. Let's see. No, sorry. We have Acosta. Acosta is new. B is new. Dust is new. Acosta is coming out in February. Dust is coming out in March. B is coming out in October. So 3 new products. It looks like Acosta is probably a high-tech product. B is probably a high-tech product. Cooper, Dust is probably a high-tech product. So probably 3 new high-tech products coming out. So we'll need to take that into account in our forecasting for Industry 96. And I think that's it. Good job. We will talk to you soon in class for the next rounds.